Thank you, everybody, for coming along today to this exciting digital stream for the Museums and Heritage Show. Don't worry, I'm not going to stand here throughout in the worst place. It's just that it's been recorded, and it seemed that this was the best place to stand just to quickly introduce everybody. So the title of this session is Social Media, Dead or Evolving? What Comes Next? And this very much comes out of a lot of conversations about what is going on with Twitter, should people get into blue sky, the ethics of using social media. And I think I brought together a quite brilliant panel. I'm slightly stand aside here. So there's Joe Vaughan from Merle. I hope I introduce everybody correctly. Just shout if I don't. There's Katie Farrell from the Digital Cultural Network, and Cheryl Cunningham from MK Gallery. So I have some questions to ask, but I'm going to try and build in some time at the end for everybody else to ask a question, because I'm sure you might have some burning questions. But the first thing I want to do is just very quickly ask everybody to introduce themselves and their kind of work relationship to social media. I think that's that would be quite interesting.
Okay,
Joe?
I'm happy to go first. Hi everyone, I'm Joe Vaughan. I'm the marketing manager at the Museum of English Rural Life in Reading, commonly known as the Merle Online. And I manage our social media, marketing, print, anything that has any adjacency to marketing I'm doing. So yeah, very nice to be here and very grateful for the invitation.
Hi everyone, my name is Katie Farrell. I'm the social media tech champion with the Digital Culture Network. We provide free and untailored support to the creative and cultural sector, and we're funded by Arts Council England, but organisations don't have to be funded to get free support from us. So if you want that support, find me afterwards. I have worked in social media for over 10 years, and 7+ of those have been in the arts and cultural sector. So I've seen a lot of things come and go. I first joined MySpace because I'm a millennial, so my introduction to social media was the gladiatorial practice of ranking your top 8 friends.
And I'm Sherelle. I am Head of Marketing and Audience at MK Gallery in Milton Keynes. And we have a mixture of exhibitions, cinema, cafe, shop offer, and I basically look after the wider marketing and audience offer. And my first social media platform was Bebo. If anybody can remember that, then you are a millennial. But yes, that's kind of the overview of my role.
Thanks, everybody. Well, I'm going to start for a question for all of you, which is, what are the greatest challenges for museums using social media in 2025? Joe, do you want to start?
I would love to start. I'm just getting up my immaculate notes that are not all caps in an Android notes file. I think I was thinking about it, and I think that the main challenge for museum social media is it's a kind of three-way fight between opportunity, expectation, and resource. So social media now isn't just one thing. I think 10 years ago, 15 years ago, you could do social media and it was like you're writing captions on Twitter and Facebook. But now it's images, it's video, it could be ads, community management. Like, social media is a village in terms of what it involves. And to make it even more complicated, those channels themselves have kind of like divided. So I mean, before you had just Twitter, now it's Twitter, Blue Sky, Threads, whatever, well, X rather. And the other challenge is, you have very small teams doing this work, and yet because there's such a huge opportunity to reach such a huge audience, the expectation often becomes very high because of that potential. Like, I think anyone who's worked in social media may have heard the ask, can you make it go viral? Which brings fear into the heart of anyone who's ever had to professionally use like an X account or whatever. So yeah, I think it's trying to get to the heart of that, and considering social media really is the online door to engagement for most museums. It is really astonishing how under-resourced and underfunded most social media teams are. So
no, I was going to say I completely agree. I think one of the challenges is the internal understanding in teams around what social media is and the expectations right down from director level to kind of the more operational teams. And so that's the first challenge, understanding what we can do with social media and allowing your teams to be creative, but then, as you said, not the expectation that every single post will go viral. So for me, the biggest challenge is getting the team on board and firstly getting them to understand what we're using the social media for.
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree. I have one-to-ones with people working in social media every single week, and the common thread that comes up every time is capacity. We have social media managers, but that's not usually their entire job. They're usually doing all the marketing, all the comms, all the press, running the website, doing the event tech. That is an actual example from someone that I've spoken to. So we're kind of expected to be on all of these platforms, like 7, 8 major platforms, and it's 15% of someone's role. Like, how are you supposed to manage that successfully? And I completely agree. I think one of the scariest things you can hear when you're working in social media is someone just coming in and going, "Oh, can you just pop that on Instagram? Is that all right?" You're like, you're like, so yeah, definitely. And there's more platforms, and it's such a changeable landscape now. There are 2 social media tech champions at the Digital Culture Network because that's how many people want to speak to us. And there's just so much changing. We have a meeting every single week to talk about what's changed in social media that week, because that's how quickly platforms are releasing new updates, and TikTok's down and then it's back up again, and should we be on Blue Sky, and it's all in flux just a lot of the time, and everyone has an opinion. I completely agree.
Okay, all right, good answers there. My second question is, what ethical considerations do museums face when using platforms with problematic policies, practices, owners? And I think, Joe, you volunteered to give an answer for this one.
Yes, I am very interested in this question. So I think the challenge is that most of the large social media platforms do have ethical issues at their heart. I mean, I always thought that the winner of Musk taking over Twitter was Mark Zuckerberg, because everyone forgot for a few minutes how evil he is. And then all it took was Trump coming into power for him to completely abandon any goodwill, all of their EDI policies, things like that. There's obviously major issues with TikTok as well. Like the fact that I was reading earlier, NATO staff aren't allowed to have TikTok accounts because of espionage threats and such like that. I think that the flip side is that as organizations that engage audiences and as users ourselves, we're all making ethical choices and compromises every single day. I mean, we all have smartphones. The TV here is probably made with an ethically compromised company. And I think that the question that museums have to encounter, and all organizations actually, is what compromises are you willing to make, and to try and be as informed about that as you can. I think that the one exception to the cabal of horrible social media platforms, in my mind, is Blue Sky, which, for people who don't know it, is it was an offshoot of Twitter. It was made by Twitter, and then Elon Musk said he didn't want to invest in it anymore, so they diverged. And they were launching for years and years and years, and then they finally had a kind of much stronger launch last year. And at the Merle, we were probably the biggest museum on Twitter. So I ran the Twitter account from 2019 basically, and we just learned it was one day last October, we were thinking, what the hell, for a long time we were thinking, what the heck do we do about Twitter, because it's our biggest platform, it's where all our audience is. And then one day I checked Blue Sky and I saw we'd never posted on this account we had there, but we had 3,000 followers. And I was like, that shows to me there is a level of audience interest. And then we just posted, the most famous tweet was this tweet, "Look at this absolute unit." And we just posted it verbatim on Blue Sky as our first post. And within an hour, we'd risen from 2,000 to 10,000 followers. And I think that the final thought I have actually on this is that when we made that thread, which I literally just did it's easy to say it was a major strategic decision. It was literally a 5-minute thing. I saw we had 3,000 followers and I did a post. But we had loads of replies from people saying, this is the tipping point for like Twitter to Blue Sky, and it made me realize that actually museums are kind of protagonists in legitimizing social media, and it's like by we're trustworthy, values-led organizations. By using some of these compromised social media platforms, we legitimize them, and it is worth thinking about that as well.
That's good. Cheryl, did you want to add anything in there?
Just your point on kind of being a values-driven organisation, I think it's probably quite key for organisations to understand what their values are and get that set in stone first, because that will kind of help you to consider whether you should move off of a social media platform or whether you want to experiment with something like Blue Sky. But more importantly is giving teams the space to be able to think about that first and not making any rash decisions, because I've seen a few organisations where it's like, right, today we're coming off Twitter because of something that might be trending or something that's in the news, and then it's kind of like you slowly just return with the same content. So I think just having the space to be able to say, what are our values? How important is it that we kind of retain these audiences? And if we do come off of a platform, what impact does that have on the audiences that we're engaging? So just having the space to be able to think about that first.
I think that leads us very nicely into the next question, which is, this is for you, Katie, which is what criteria should museums use when deciding to maintain or sunset legacy, that sounds crazy, to shut down, I'm going to say, social media accounts? And how do you evaluate what emerging platforms are worth investing in?
Yeah, so I'll start with leaving, and it's perfect from Sherel's point. Like, the most important thing you have to think about if you're thinking of leaving a platform is where are your audiences. So are your audiences engaging with you on the platform that you're considering leaving? So the best way to find that out is to look at your analytics. Now, I appreciate that some in-platform analytics you have to pay for. Not ideal. But monitor them over the course of 3, 6, 12 months, whatever time frame you want. Look at the reach and impressions and if your followers are going up and down. Most of the 100 most visited museums grew their social media followers last year, but all lost followers on X. So it's worth having a look at and seeing how that's going. Think about segmentation as well. 42% of X users are young men. Is that a key audience for you? But there's also schools and journalists there. So if you leave, are you going to be able to still speak to those people, or are you going to lose that connection? And does it matter? Also, your followers might be there, but are they engaging with you? So again, in terms of your metrics, that's your likes, your comments, your shares, etc. Is the platform meeting your social media objectives? So if your objective is to engage with your audiences and your audience on that platform aren't engaging with you, is it the right platform for you? Then does it align with your values? We've just talked about that. Consider how all platforms align with your values and ethics, and be very, very clear, as Sherel said, in what those are and where the line is for you. And finally, consider your exit plan. So with some platforms, your handle could be released in 6 months' time and anyone could claim it. So think about the brand implications of that. It happened to a well-known middle-class holiday company with chalets. They were still linking to their X account from their website, and some random took their handle. So think about that. In terms of thinking about joining a platform, I think, again, are your audiences there? So Joe's example is perfect. They secured the handle because they thought that they might go at some point. They weren't actively using it. And boom, already had an audience. Now, we're not all units, but it's worth joining a platform as an individual just to vibe check it, like see how it is, see who's there, see if there's a sensible audience for you or not. But also, do you have the time to join a new platform? It takes time, resource, skills. Do you already use the platform? Is there someone in your team who does? If you're thinking about joining TikTok, do you know how to make a TikTok? Because it's a learning curve, so it's really worth thinking about. See if your peers or competitors are on the platform as well. And just think about, really, all of this comes down to your social media strategy. And they are 3 terrifying words to anyone working in social media. Our brains just close down. It doesn't have to be war and peace. It can be 2 sides of A4. But you need to know what you want to achieve, who you're talking to and how you're going to measure success, and that will tell you which platforms you need to be on.
Very good, thank you. Well, I'm going to touch on the resource issue again now, which is one that's already come up at the beginning. But is it possible for museums to successfully run social media channels on limited resources? And do museums have to be on social media? So, Joe, do you want to start there?
Yeah, absolutely. So, the question was about resource and...
Well, is it possible for museums to successfully run social media channels on limited resources? Because so many do,
yeah.
as we've already been talking about.
Yeah,
do
for sure.
Try to do
Yes.
it on a shoestring and try to do so much.
Yeah. So I think it definitely is possible, and I would hope that Merle is a case study. I mean, we have... Previously, we've had like me doing it with assistance from someone on 0.5 hours, so it's very, very, very small. I would say that the way to do it is to think again about that idea of like not ubiquitous like social media, but to target one or two areas. Like especially if you're trying to really excel at one specific thing. Like in our case, me and my predecessor Adam Kazari both are like interested in writing and writing jokes, so it was quite natural for us to lean into something like Twitter and then Blue Sky, which is very like, you know, short form jokes. Whereas other museums, for example, it might be that you have someone who is a extremely passionate TikToker or like, you know, an amazing photographer, and so on that basis I think it would make sense to lean into those strengths. I think the risk becomes, like Katie touched on earlier, is when you're expecting to do everything extremely well, which I think is unrealistic. And yeah, so if you don't have high resource, which I think is probably true of 100% of museums, or maybe even 110%, I think pick what you feel you can do well, and try and get that buy-in from management as well. That's the other thing I think is the clash between like management expectations and actual staff. Sometimes that can be a sticking point, I think.
Yeah. Katie, do you want to say something?
Yeah, I completely agree. If you don't take anything else away from what I'm going to say today, I want you to take this. You don't have to be on every platform. You don't have to join Blue Sky just because you're leaving X. It's okay. You have permission. You also don't need to post on every platform every day. So if Instagram is working really well to you, just as Joe's saying, if that's where you're getting most of your results, then, but you kind of want to keep LinkedIn ticking over and you want to give Blue Sky a go, it's absolutely fine to post on Instagram 3 times a week and LinkedIn and Blue Sky once a week. Totally fine. You can prioritize where you're putting most of your effort in terms of where you're getting your return. And make sure that you've defined your audiences. If you are like, our audience is everyone. Every single person should always come to our museum at all of the times. You're probably not engaging anyone because you've not tapped in to those people. You need to build in time to learn, scroll, and discover on platforms. Scrolling is not a waste of time. If you need to be chronically online in order to understand the culture of social media, that's part of your job. So build time into your content plan to do that. And I'd say enjoy yourself and lean into your niche. Merle have done this beautifully, and all the museums who are really smashing it on social media, they are being 100% unapologetically themselves, and often a little bit weird. It's important to have a marketing strategy, as I've said so many times. And I think, do you have to be on social media? No, but it is an important part of the digital marketing strategy. Kind of my final point on this is, it's not your entire digital marketing strategy. It shouldn't be your entire marketing funnel. Social media is great for a lot of things. Brand awareness, engaging with your audiences and communities. What it's not great at is getting people to your website or selling a ticket or something from your shop. So that doesn't mean it's no use. You've got to get people into the top of your marketing funnel if you ever want to get them to the bottom. But think about it more holistically than that. And yeah, everyone in your organisation should know that going viral won't fill your museum.
I mean, I completely agree. I think the main sentiment is really getting buy-in from kind of the top part of the organisation and getting them to understand that teams need to have a space to be experimental. And as you said, scrolling isn't a waste of time to understand, what content might work for your audience. I also think there's a consideration that we need to make around the constant consumption of social media by our digital teams, and there isn't really a defined line between personal consumption and consumption for work. When you talk about limited resource, we know social media teams often use their personal phone to do socials, and so I think we should consider what that means for our teams when they're constantly consuming content, whether it be positive or negative, and how that impacts the work they do. So I kind of want organisations to think about that and how that might affect strategy for the teams.
I could have taken them both. I do. On Cheryl's point, I do think it's actually really important with safeguarding for social media teams, because social media is it's designed to be addictive, and that addictiveness is for users and for creators, and obviously you're both when you're working on it. And I think the issue of chasing the kind of dopamine rush of a post going viral or something can actually be really exhausting and really dangerous. And I think maybe it's a conversation for another time, but I think it is a point about social media managers need protecting and caring for, and often actually the way organizations treat them is just to pile more and more work on. It's like, oh, you're the social media manager, well, how about you also do front of house, or you're a curator or something? It's it's really a hard job that I think needs more guardrails.
I think that's a really good point.
I also think, really quickly, just to add on to that, there's a lot of content that we've seen recently online, when you think about some of the trending topics that have happened, that affect teams in different ways. And if you think of our social media teams, there could be some people who have lived experience in different areas, and consuming that content might affect them differently from someone else. So I think, going back, we just need to consider how that constant consumption can have effect on teams, and have the space to be able to kind of debrief, step back, take a moment before it's kind of like, what can go viral now, what can get the highest engagement. So if that's one thing to kind of remember and consider from today, it's just how our teams are having to constantly consume that content online.
That's a very good point. Check in on your social media people and ensure they don't have burnout. I wanted to touch on AI here, because I think there's a beginning of a use of people using AI. So what do you think about museums using AI to generate social media content, such as text, images, video? You've got the mic, Joe. Do you want to start?
Yeah. So I think AI is obviously very divisive. I think it's a bit of a. It's interesting thinking about it in terms of resource, right? Like, we're saying that museums, social media teams are really understaffed, they're really burned out. I think social media, AI rather, it offers a kind of illusory aid in terms of, oh, you could just use AI to do more content. But actually, the content that you'll create with the AI, I'm not sure is necessarily always either fit for purpose, because often it's very obvious a lot of the time when someone uses ChatGPT. I mean, there's all the talk on LinkedIn about EM dashes or whatever, but it's more just you can tell when ChatGPT has written the post, and I think it's even more true for images. And it's interesting that people get very excited about the fact that AI images are getting extremely accurate. It reminds me of being a kid playing PlayStation games and being like, wow, it's so accurate, when you're playing Crash Bandicoot in 2000. But I actually think that the really interesting thing for museums is we are organizations that literally organize around having interesting content that is worth telling stories about. And the idea of using AI to generate images, to me, defeats the purpose of what museums actually are. I think, I would say museums, it's literally the superpower of museums when it comes to social media is we have content. If you go to any other company or any other account, imagine being a cereal brand, what are you going to post on social media, cereal? Museums have so much stuff that's interesting, and I think we should focus on that rather than the AI side. I would say that like, as a disclosure, like I have used ChatGPT before for like processing stats. So if it's like I can't do Python or whatever, so I'm like, ChatGPT, pretend you're a Python genius and do something. It will do it, and it will save loads of time. But yeah, I would say it's be cautious, I think, about using it for making content. But I'm curious what the other panelists think as well.
Yeah, I think for me, I kind of echo your sentiment. I think the main thing is being honest about where we are in this kind of world of AI. It's very new to us, not just as a sector, but as a whole. So I think it's having the space to learn and see what could be useful for you with limited resource. But I'm kind of the same sentiment. I think we really need to be careful about kind of imagery that might be AI created, and know that, as you said, we have spaces where there's constantly new content. We have exhibitions, some of us have wider offerings as well. So I think using that to create new and interesting and creative content is probably the way to go, while making sure that you're up to date with some of the newest developments, because we are moving towards that direction, whether any of us like it or not. We are becoming a more AI-generated digital world. So as a sector, we need to make sure that we're up to date with kind of the latest developments, but keep a sense of integrity around the content that we're putting out on our channels.
Thank you. This is the last question. I was a little bit afraid that we might go down a negative route. I don't think we have at all. But I wanted to finish on a positive question, which is, what are the museums that you believe are most successful at using social media, and why? So come on, wow us with your favourites.
So to echo what Joe said, I do think museums are coming up with some of the best content on social media in the sector, because you have stuff which is great and you've got some really great stories to tell. So I've got loads, but I'll be quick. The Tank Museum, they won the Digital Marketing Digital Culture Award this year that the Digital Culture Network run. Not digital in there. But they're such a wonderful example of how leaning into your niche, and they were like, guys, tanks are wicked. And they really lent into that, and they've completely transformed their entire business model through social media monetization. They're talking tomorrow, so if you're here tomorrow, definitely go and check them out, because it's out of this world. The Royal Armouries, they created an environment where their team could be creative and have autonomy, and they just took TikTok by storm. It was absolutely incredible. The content's funny, it's educational, and it's highlighting voices that are sometimes not heard in the space. The Migration Museum, they are another Digital Culture Award winner this year, and they have used paid social in such an amazing way to leverage their organic, engaged audiences and drive shop sales. Absolutely amazing. The Thackeray Museum of Medicine, they've been using content creators really well. If you're thinking about possibly partnering with content creators, go and have a look at what they've done on Instagram. They've just gone viral with it. They're delighted. And finally, the Oxford Museum of Natural History, they have used TikTok so well. They use trending music brilliantly. It really works with the tone of the platform, but they're, again, keeping their collections and their people front and centre. There's some really good examples in this sector.
Great.
Yeah, so Katie took all of my main ones, but I think that for me, the Design Museum has done some really interesting things lately with social media, also making sure that it's inclusive and accessible. So that's the main example for me. And also, I will say, Milton Keynes Gallery, even though I work there, has done some really interesting things with social media recently around our Warhol exhibition, where we've had kind of limited copyright around images, and just being really clever in how we can keep it accessible and entertaining.
Great.
Yeah, mine have also been taken. I mean, I was going to just say the Tank Museum. Do go to the talk tomorrow, because the work they do is absolutely astonishing. I think last year they had something like 300 million watches on YouTube. Like it's phenomenal. But I also do think that in terms of who is doing the best, I think like all social media teams who are just being able to get content out is also like very worthy of being included, because when you think about it, like if social media is like 15-20% of your job, that's 80% of your job that is not doing social media, that gets in the way of the good stuff. So yeah, I think actually just being able to like consistently turn out I think it's like social media is kind of like a stand-up show that never ends, like, and so just being able to like pace yourself, make content, show up, yeah, is really worth noting as well.
Yeah,
So
I
yeah,
agree
shout
there.
out to
Big
all
up the
social media
social
teams.
media teams
Big up, yeah.
working in difficult circumstances. Well, it's your chance to ask questions now. I've got 10 minutes set aside for this. I hope you do have some questions. So, great.
Hello. This is working. Yes, I can hear myself in my own ear. That's weird. My previous role, I mostly did the social media, and sometimes I would go on holiday and my colleague would take over, and I thought we were both being very rigid and sticking to the boring social media tone of voice and all of that. People said to me that they could tell when I was away and someone else was doing it, and I was initially mortified, and then I felt complimented. I didn't know what I was meant to think about that. Any thoughts on that?
I think it's fine to have different tones of voices across your social media. I think you might want to have a kind of general brand around your platforms, but I think it's fine to do that because if you think about our audiences, we all kind of have our own styles of speech and communication anyway. So I think it's okay to have that difference. But I think maybe that's where you'd have some kind of social media planner where you'd have your set posts, which I'm sure you're already...
I mean, I thought we'd done all that stuff.
But yeah, maybe a mixture of both, where you have a different tone of voice, but also kind of your key posts that stick to the key messages that you want to share. Don't know.
Yeah, I completely agree. And like, we're not robots. Like, it's not AI running our social media yet. So it's always going to have a bit of your tone of voice, similar to Joe when I was running social media. Like, I loved writing, and I would always structure my sentences in a particular way, regardless of what tone of voice I was using. So it's always going to be an element of your personality in there. And when I worked in an agency, and I had to do social media around private medical scanning, guys, so you have got this, I would always say, can we just write posts as if we're people and human? Because you have to put humanity in there to make it engaging. So honestly, I think it's fine.
I also think it's actually valid to be like to put on a social media out of office. Like, if like we've done it before at Merle, just being like, hey, just so you know, social media managers out of office for a week, so we're going to be quieter. And I don't know, I just feel like everyone else in the world gets that pass. Like, I've worked in a few, I mean, I've been in social media like 10 or 11 years. I have worked in places where social media, the expectation is you are always on, you're never off. You know, if a message comes through, there's an expectation, you check it. I've been fortunate at Merle. My predecessor, before I became like the marketing manager and I just was digital, was very, very generous in saying, you know, we are not always on, we're kind of 9 to 5 and then you're off. And I just think as part of like humanizing social media teams, we shouldn't pretend, like museums shouldn't pretend sometimes that we have 1 million people in our social teams. Like, what does that achieve? It's just strange to me that is the expectation around it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Another question? Oh, right at the back, I think there's one. Oh, sorry.
Hi. How would you kind of approach or preempt dealing with trolls or harassment, especially on media where maybe you're doing videos with like employees or teams' faces and they're like actually could be personally impacted by that?
Did you relay that?
It was about how do you deal with trolls? Sorry, we didn't hear it very well, so...
Oh no, it's not you. It's the mics, I think.
Yeah. So it's
how do you deal with trolls?
I think that's the basic thing.
Is that? Yeah.
So have a crisis comms plan, please. So, you know, have guidelines in terms of what you find acceptable, and what you don't, and stick to it. I think have a crisis comms plan, so if something does blow up, you know the steps. You know exactly who it's going to, who's making the decision, who's signing off the comms. If it's kind of everyday microaggressions, still have a plan for that. So make sure that everyone in the team understands where the line is in terms of what's acceptable and what's not and what you need to deal with. Also, I really recommend the space, have some really fantastic digital toolkits about protecting your teams who work on social media. Kind of to Joe's point about being always on and burnout is real. Look at what you can put in place to protect your team.
And also, you don't always have to react. You know, I think sometimes there's an expectation that you have to respond to trolls, and you don't. A lot of the time, they're looking for a response. And if it clashes with the values of your organisation, then to me, it's block and delete if you need to. You don't need to respond. You don't need to give them that engagement. But have your crisis comms. I agree with that 100%. Have that in place. Know what lines that you need to kind of share if there is a response that's needed.
Yeah, I agree. I think as well, it's worth pointing out that sometimes replying to trolls actually heightens the prominence of the issue, especially in like things like Twitter, Blue Sky, where a reply surfaces the post to your entire audience. Like sometimes it really, you should note it and you should have a plan in place. I think that's really important. But yeah, I think sometimes actually engaging with it, if it goes from trolling to being a crisis, especially if it then brings other people in. So yeah.
Yeah, good advice. Another question, please. Somebody at the back there. Oh.
Thank you for a very, very interesting set of perspectives. This has been a very interesting discussion for me because I'm from a firm which provides services, and the discussion is focused on transmit rather than receive. I'm interested in what you receive. If you're in echo chambers with other museums, or if actually you're receptive to services firms, bearing in mind that at this show there's most of the exhibitors are trying to offer services to museums and heritage organisations. What do we need to do if we have valuable services that we'd like you to know about for you to be receptive to them, or are you just not receptive?
That's the difference. Sorry, that was. Unfortunately, they can't hear from back here. Could you just make it a bit shorter so I can convey it a little bit easier?
That would be lovely. Thank you. What can services firms do to if we're offering services to museums, how can we get onto your channels and how can we make you listen to us?
Okay, so if they belong to a service, well, a company offering services to museums, how I guess they engage with you on social media? Would you listen to them? Would you engage with them? You know.
I think in my mind, it depends on the nature of the work. Like I think with social, I actually think one of the most important things with social media is you have to protect your staff and you have to also protect your audience, because we're in this culture of like, as Katie and Sherelle mentioned earlier, like you will always get colleagues being like, hey, can you put this on Instagram? And it's the worst photo of all time, or it's like just something that's completely inappropriate. And I think you're always thinking like, will our audience be interested in this? You don't want to lose your audience. And so I think when you're a service, it probably depends on the nature of the service and whether what you're doing is of interest to the audience. Like as an example, we've worked with like conservators before who've taken like photos of what they've been doing and shared stuff, and that is interesting because it's a kind of it aligns with what we would want to be talking about to our audience anyway. But I think if it's something really behind the scenes or something really technical, then it would require more thought.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. Social media content needs to broadly be one of three things, and that's educational, informative, or entertaining. And if you're not hitting one of those three things, it's probably not a great social media post. And although social media should definitely be about engaging with other people on social, you shouldn't just be pumping out information. It's a conversation, not screaming. Then it can be a really nice way to engage with other services, of course. But yeah, to Joe's point, everything that museums put on their social media channels should be servicing the audience on that channel.
Okay, I've got time for just one quick question. Very quick question, if anybody's got a burning one.
You mentioned earlier about getting stakeholders on board for more just creative, slightly unhinged content. Do you have any tips on how you've made that work, because we've tried a few times and occasionally it's been successful and then we've got a really lovely reaction, but they're still like really, really reticent to just be a little bit weird.
Oh, sorry. It's about getting stakeholders on board. Sorry, because I was looking at the time.
Shall I just shout?
Yes, it was. Yeah, guys.
Yeah, it's just about getting stakeholders on board for
About
just doing weird stuff on social
Getting
media.
stakeholders on board for being weird.
Yeah.
Yes, that's
Okay.
a great way to put it.
So I think that the thing with social media is museums sometimes think you're trying to be a museum rather than trying to do social media well. And so I think it's really worth looking and referring to what other big brands are doing. Like I made the point earlier about like if you're a cereal company, what are you going to post? But actually, there are some cereal companies that do really good social media by posting nothing about cereal. Like there's one, I think it's a brand called Surreal that has like a really viral LinkedIn. They don't post anything about cereal, but they have huge engagement. The same with Duolingo is probably the most pertinent example of like a massive company that has huge social media channels that really have nothing to do with learning languages. So I think it's kind of trying to separate being a museum, like it's almost a different product to an extent. There is overlap, and as Kate said, I think that's part of the tension with how we want social media to work for us. We want social media to be like a brand tool. We want it to make people like us. We want to sell tickets. But actually, doing social media well for a lot of companies does have a very different look to what they're actually doing. So, yeah, I'd recommend just looking at what kind of the big, especially the American companies, in my mind, do it a lot better. But like looking at what some of the really big American companies who also have a lot to lose have done with social media. Like Wendy's is a really good example. Moon Pie is my favorite social media account ever. The Moon Pie Twitter. If you want some bangers, look that up, because they were very weird, but it was still like sweet, and it never went into. I mean, Duolingo is really unhinged. Like they killed their mascot and had a funeral for it, which I think I don't know how I feel about that, but that's for a different panel. But anyway, yeah, I would say refer to what big business is doing, and if they can do it, museums can also do it.
I'm afraid I'm going to have to close it there because we're quite tight on deadlines, so I'll get into trouble if not. Thank you so much, Joe, Kate and Sherelle.